Hi everyone, my name is Tricia Lantzy. I'm the Health Sciences and Human Services librarian. I'm from Cal State San Marcos, and I'm going to be moderating today's discussion. And our webinar today, excuse me, is called Sustainable Libraries: Insights from San Diego Circuit. So today our 1 hour panel discussion features librarians from our San Diego Circuit libraries, including CSUSM, SDSU, UC San Diego, and SDCL, excuse me. And they're going to introduce themselves in just a minute. Again, my name's Tricia Lantzy. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm going to go ahead and let the rest of the panelists introduce themselves now. Lali, do you want to go first?
Sure, I'll go ahead. I'm Lalitha Nataraj. I'm the social sciences librarian at Cal State San Marcos. My pronouns are she, her, hers. Um, my involvement with sustainability practices and initiatives is multifold. One of my liaison areas here at Cal State San Marcos is environmental studies. So, of course, there's the curricular and research needs connection. But as a librarian invested in social justice and anti-racist praxis, I see sustainability practices as necessary to equity-based courses of action. So to me, it doesn't make sense to not be engaged in this type of work.
Thank you so much, Lali. And I do realize that I just jumped ahead of me going over the plan. So I'm going to go over the plan and then we'll go along with the next three panelists. I did want to say, housekeeping, our Zoom etiquette today. If you could please keep your questions till the very end or put them in chat as we're going along, that would be great. We have 20 minutes of Q&A at the end, so we should have time to address any questions that you have. And our plan today is we have 4 questions for the panelists. I'm going to go Lali, Sarah, Amy, and Susan each time, just so we're kind of going through the same order and we know what to expect. And the first question is the question I jumped ahead before I did the introduction today. And that is the one Lali already did. And that is you're in an introduction of who you are and why you're doing what you're doing. So thank you, Lali, for introducing yourself. Sarah, if you could go next, that would be great.
Hi everyone, I'm Sarah Tribelhorn. My pronouns are she, her, hers. I'm the sciences librarian at San Diego State University, and I'm the chair of our library sustainability committee, which we call the Green Team. Throughout my working life, I have been involved in sustainability in various forms. I was a researcher prior to becoming a librarian. And I have always looked at the interconnection between the environmental practices, social equity, and economic feasibility. I started before this position as a student member of ALA's Sustainability Roundtable, and I've been on that for about 4 years and noticed that a lot of libraries are doing work in sustainability. There was a heavy focus on public libraries, and you can find a lot of information on public libraries, but limited publications and academic libraries. So I really saw this niche. And then when I started in this job, it just so happened that they needed somebody to work on the UN SDGs. So my very first task was to map what we were doing to the UN SDGs in the library. And then as a result of that, really developed the Sustainability Committee. And then further, we have enrolled in the Sustainable Libraries Initiative Certification Program, which we have not completed yet. We're probably about 2/3 of the way through what we need to do. But that's kind of what we're doing. So it really was a personal driver and then finding this gap in sustainability.
Thank you so much, Sarah. Our next participant is Amy from UCSD.
Hi all, my name is Amy Work, pronouns she and her, and I am the GIS librarian at UC San Diego. And so why am I doing this? I think it's a part of who I am and a core foundation. So like Sarah said, part of my history was in geography, and so looking at the interactions between human and the environment, and have been involved in so many different projects in my previous history that it just made sense, right? It's one of these, we do the work for those who are the voiceless and for future generations. And so how do we continue to be in the library and provide these resources and knowledge and examples for others in the future. So I look forward to this presentation, and thank you for having me.
Thank you so much, Amy. And our last panelist is Susan from SDCL.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Susan Moore. I'm Deputy Director for the County Library. I oversee all of our branches, capital projects, facilities, safety, and sustainability for the library. Sustainability is a value of our county's general management system and an area of emphasis in operations. For my part, I've been involved with facilities, and our buildings have embraced sustainability for a number of years. And so it was a natural thing for me to take the lead when we decided to emphasize sustainability as one of our own.
Oh no, Susan, did we lose you? I don't know what happened there. Well, we're going to work on the back end with Susan to get her audio back up. Susan, we will come back to you once we get that figured out. Okay, let's move on to our next question for each of our panelists. And that question is, why should libraries be leaders in sustainability? Lolly, do you want to take that first?
Sure. So oftentimes the library is a core hub of the college and university community. And this often entails being self-sustaining across different areas. So including building operations, collection strategies, and information literacy instruction. And because we work closely with a variety of internal and external stakeholders, we have to be invested in creating a culture of sustainability that is equity-based and also serves as a model for mitigating waste and saving energy.
Thank you, Lolly. And Sarah, do you want to go next?
I feel that libraries are perfectly positioned to be the sustainability champions for several reasons. One of the reasons is that we are hubs for information and learning. So by embracing sustainable practices ourselves, we can set an example for our communities and inspire others to follow suit. We can also offer programs, much as what we are doing here, to educate patrons about environmental issues and sustainability solutions, similarly to what we have done with the Circuit Climate Justice series. We can also, as I mentioned, model sustainability, incorporate sustainability into our daily operations. And as Lali mentioned, energy efficiency, promoting digital resources, things like that. And we are also important gathering spaces for communities. So by prioritizing library sustainability, we can show our communities that we are invested in the well-being of the planet and the people that live here. And this can help to create a more sustainable and healthy future for everyone. So I really feel that libraries have the power to educate, inspire, and model sustainable practices, making them leaders in our communities.
Thank you so much, Sarah. Amy, same question, please.
So thank you. So I also forgot to mention, due to a slight head cold I am dealing with, that I'm also a member and a co-chair of our Library Sustainability Committee at UC San Diego. And so why should libraries be leaders in sustainability? It's right, we're a trusted part of our communities. We're a hub for knowledge dissemination and a support for lifelong learning. And so we have a long history of preserving knowledge and cultural heritage for future generations. So it's important that we don't just provide access to knowledge around that, but we demonstrate those elements. And so demonstrating as a part of our everyday practices, our operations, down to how we handle sort of waste and other elements within our library. So it's outward facing, but it's also internal and with our staff. And having great library administration support also it helps advance those initiatives along the way. You know, it's not just about recycling, it's about understanding the social justices issues behind these elements of sustainability and how they impact everyone, right? And so it truly is not just providing knowledge and information around sustainability, but demonstrating these practices. And that's where libraries are leaders in sustainability.
Thank you so much, Amy. Susan, I see you're back with us. Can you hear us? And is the tech stuff all figured out?
I can. What happened? Did
I
you
don't
lose me?
But
Sorry.
if you could finish your introduction from the last question and then answer the question that we're currently on, which is why should libraries be leaders in sustainability?
Sure. I'm not sure where I left, but I will be glad to repeat myself. Susan Moore, I'm Deputy Director for the County Library over branches, capital projects, facilities, safety, and sustainability. Sustainability is a value of the county's management system and emphasis of operations. However, the library has been involved in sustainability for a number of years, going back into like the 2010s when we started building buildings for sustainability. I've spent the last couple of years leading our effort for Sustainable Libraries Initiative certification, which we have just completed. And we hope to be the first library on the West Coast to achieve certification. Now we're focused on sharing what we've learned and continuing what we started. We do this because we care about the community and we want to encourage librarians to be leaders. Libraries are perfectly situated to be sustainability leaders. Libraries in California are already operating sustainably as they follow laws enacted to encourage sustainability in building design, recycling, and composting. But as you've already heard, it's more than that. Libraries are community hubs that can provide demonstration of sustainability in building design, programs, services, to educate the public, partnerships, and more importantly, encourage curiosity by providing resources and demonstration programs for communities to act sustainably. Libraries tell the story of how you can act sustainably and act as an important way to encourage it. Some of the ways we do that, we have a web page that showcases sustainability, and I'll put that in the chat for you. We also tag our sustainability programs so people can find things to participate in and observe. And of course, we showcase resources for sustainability. But we also, one of the lessons learned working on Sustainable Libraries Initiative is what's really personal in your life that you're doing that helps support sustainability. That has helped us to personally connect with all of our staff and find their enthusiasm for sustainability. In my case, I really try to separate food waste because I'm appalled at how much food waste goes into the landfill. So those are just some of the reasons why I think libraries are great for sustainability.
Thank you so much, Susan. Our next question, we're asking panelists to tell us a little about some successful or even some unsuccessful library initiatives on climate resilience, sustainability, or environmental justice work. So this question really is kind of like the meat of what we're coming together today about. So we have about 4 or 5 minutes for each participant, and I'll let you know if you hit that 4 or 5 minute mark. Lolly, could you go ahead and get us started?
Sure, I'm happy to do that. So CSUSM Library has been involved in several sustainability initiatives over the last few years. Some really exciting ones in recent months. Just this week, in fact, we just had our grand opening of our makery space, which has been in the works for a few years. This is the makery is a maker space that serves as a quote dynamic center of creativity and learning within our university, end quote. So sustainability and equity come into play because here we're providing the space and tools for the campus community to freely create and innovate in an environment that is warm and inclusive. So students have access to like so many tools to just kind of come in, and basically just freely, develop their ideas. And that's really exciting. We also have our CALM program, which stands for Cougars Affordable Learning Solutions. This is actually our campus's affordable learning solutions program. And basically, it's encouraging faculty to use low to zero cost accessible textbooks rather than expensive alternatives. I believe, I want to say that we've saved about $3.8 million. I see that my dean is actually in this webinar, so she's nodding her head.
Yes, I just got those numbers yesterday.
So that is that's really quite exciting and wonderful. This is a great program. Other things that we're doing in the library, as Sarah had mentioned, modeling is really important. And our library staff, we model these practices when our users come in. So we have hydration stations. All of our library staff, we tend to bring in our own water bottles and refill throughout the day. So the hydration stations, they're bottle fill stations that are on all of our library floors. So of course, we're reducing the use of disposable plastic bottles. And in 2021, we also repurposed and reinstalled 88 existing device charging stations within our renovated hybrid learning lab. So that reduces e-waste and it helps to control project costs. Whenever we have events in the library, we always redistribute any leftover food. We either share it, with our students, or we share out information to our entire library staff saying, hey, here's some food if anyone wants to partake. And then also some other things we're doing, we regularly work with our campus sustainability folks to donate unneeded electronics, office supplies, furnishings, etc., anything used previously by library employees, so that, again, reducing landfill waste. And another thing I want to share that's really exciting for our campus is that we're in the process right now of developing a climate action and sustainability center. And that came through our climate change faculty working group, which was established just around, I want to say maybe just before the pandemic went into effect. I want to say maybe late 2019 or so. And the impetus for developing the center is really the need to help prepare our students, our community, and broader region to mitigate, adapt to, and be resilient in the face of wide-ranging and potentially severe climate change impacts. So that proposal right now is making its way through our governance bodies, and so we'll see if this center happens. But I'm very optimistic. It's going to be, again, a centralized interdisciplinary hub, and it's going to really enhance our student, faculty, and staff engagement, and also deepen our collaborations within the region. So really exciting, cool stuff.
Thank you, Lolly. Sarah, can you tell us about what's happening at SDSU?
Sure. Thank you so much. It was really exciting to hear a lot of what you're doing, Lolly. We are doing very similar things. And I guess that we are with the Sustainable Libraries Initiative Certification Program, we're in the first cohort of academic libraries that are doing this. So we're kind of feeling our way a little bit because I think it was really marked towards public libraries. So we have a wonderful mentor who has managed to do this in Florida, where they are not allowed to even have sustainability on their website. So she's managed to really give us insight into the kind of things that we can do. So we have, as part of the benchmarking that we had done, and our mapping to the UN SDGs, we recognized a lot of the things that Lali was talking about. So we are doing recycling. A lot of it is not necessarily library driven. Some of it is campus driven. So we are feeding into that. So we're feeding into our campus recycling, our campus purchasing policies in terms of paper, to use recycled paper, to report on the paper that we are using. We have just been enrolled in our campus composting program, where it is student run and they actually come and collect your compost and take it away. It is not a public, it is actually just library workers at this stage, just because our facilities cannot cope with doing that, at the kind of large scale. But we are one of the first departments that are actually enrolled in that program. And then we do have several other initiatives as part of the Sustainable Libraries Initiative certification. So there's obviously a focus on each of the different areas. So it's environmental, it is your social equity, as well as economic feasibility. So we're really digging deep into all of those areas, analyzing our policies. We've developed a sustainability policy for the library. We've developed things that go along with that, like a checklist for all events in the library to try and get them as low waste as possible. And get everybody on board. So there's a lot of programming around that. There's a lot of energy that goes into that, and a lot of education that goes around with that. So we do kind of low-key workshopping. Workshopping, I do have to say, we did have to, note successful and unsuccessful initiatives. Workshopping here, I want to say, has been not that it hasn't been successful, but it's not in our culture to give these kind of workshops. So we don't have a really huge attendance, but it is increasing and we're persistent with it. So we do things like over the holiday season, we did a sustainable gift wrapping workshop and had the education along with that, tying into all our programming. And we actually had some campus, it was advertised campus-wide, and we actually had people outside the library attending that. One thing that we have just done is launched a citizen science programming in line with Citizen Science Month and SciStarters program, which was 1,000,000 Acts of Science for April. So we tied into that, focusing on projects that we are doing, linking to projects that we are doing either in the library or on campus, which is really exciting. So just through what we're doing, we've linked to some of our faculty. Our San Diego State University Biodiversity Museum is actually collecting all the data in San Diego for the upcoming City Nature Challenge. So if anybody is taking part in that with iNaturalist, you'll be feeding into the Biodiversity Museum data, which is pretty cool. So for us, it's really just been ongoing education, really just analyzing what we are doing in terms of the certification and the requirements, and trying to meet those. And then hopefully our next steps will be to build on those to really set goals and targets, as well as I mentioned that we had benchmarked what we are doing to the UN SDGs. We're now really going to focus on the targets and intentionally work towards those targets, knowing what our benchmarking is.
Thank you so much, Sarah. Amy, can you tell us what UC San Diego is doing?
Yeah, so just like many of those presented before, we at UC San Diego are doing the same thing. So the refill stations are now in our library. We do composting in the staff kitchens, so it's for staff only, but that's in collaboration with our larger campus sustainability. So volunteers are taking those compost bins out and then putting in the larger campus compost. And so we're sort of still scaling that out. Sort of the open educational resources, right? Being able to provide access to resources without having students buy textbooks. So both that's sustainability on sort of the production side, as well as then justice in terms of social justice access, right? Accessibility to those resources. We also make our library book covers. So book covers that have been taken off books, those are freely available for students, staff, others. Another department on campus reached out, sort of inquiring if they could get those to be able to support larger projects on their side. One of the things that was also a recent success was our library acquired electric vehicles to be able to transport items between, but that's a larger campus collaboration. It's not just dependent on the library. So it's these true partnerships that happen between the library and other parts of campus. I'll say another recent initiative that we did that was, I'll say coming back to, I think, Susan, what you mentioned, right, making this personal, is we hosted a digital cleanup week in conjunction with our library IT, right? So we have digital waste, and we don't necessarily think about this, right? Or duplicate files, emails that we haven't touched in a while, and all of those are stored on the cloud. Well, the cloud has a physical footprint on this earth. And so how do we take time to help our staff clean up their digital footprint? And so we hosted, right, 15-minute sessions, drop in, clean up your space. And while we saw some decrease, we saw one increase. And it's like, well, what's going on here? We're just shuffling things back and forth, right? But it's this awareness of saying, spend 15 minutes, clean up your digital footprint. But this idea that now we want to host those again. And it was really positive feedback just by saying we need to take time. We need to be aware that digital does have a physical impact on our landscape. And so how do we just take time? But I'm also going to talk about one thing. So prior to my time at UC San Diego, there was a library sustainability group, I'll say, and they learned that they tried to get the library building. So again, a different administration. Some people are still here, some people are not, but from the committee. But they tried to get our library as LEED certified for an existing building. So leading energy and efficiency design. They met with others on campus, but at the time, the current administration chose not to move forward with those actions. And so there was a lot of time and effort spent in, right? But that was, they didn't succeed on their initial goal of getting it LEED certified. However, that set up the pathway to create these smaller initiatives that were successful. And so while, right, like they didn't necessarily meet the big target, it's those smaller initiatives and provided a pathway for them to see, what's small, what's sustainable, what can we do, what can we accomplish. Some of those, for example, are a rehome closet. And so we have a lot of supplies and other materials, right, that different programs in the library don't necessarily need, right? I no longer need these, paper separators, or I have extra Post-it notes or pens, or I have hole punches that I don't need. So we've created a rehome closet, a physical space where staff can put their, materials that they no longer need. And anytime you need, you can go in, find an item. And so it's saving on both, waste in terms of stuff going into the landfill, but also cost for the library that I can repurpose something that another program no longer needs. From a look here first for the rehome closet, they created a free market cart. So that was specifically for library-based materials. The free market cart is really designed for bring anything from home that you no longer necessarily want or need, and you can put it on this cart. And roughly once a month, library volunteers will take those no longer used or claimed items to a donation center. So again, being able to try and support that. Some of that also includes campus resources as well. There's a fruit and veggie exchange. Again, we have gardeners and people who really want to share their produce. So that's grown to not just share fruits and veggies, but also seeds and other, other cuttings from their home. And another thing is also sort of similar to packaging, right, or sustainable packaging. We have a holiday gift giving guide, which we have combined, and so it's a multi-page document talking about what gifts can you acquire that would be sustainable. So maybe those are memberships rather than actually buying material goods, or if you are going to buy something, maybe you can buy from these particular organizations, right, or 1% for the planet. Right, certain ones that are giving back both socially and economically and sustainably back. So that was actually picked up by the larger campus and shared with others outside. So we're doing a variety of different things. And I know, right, there was a recent, President's Forum on Sustainability. And so a lot of individuals came back with ideas of what are those next steps to move forward? How do we make our library more sustainable? How do we come through? So excited to talk more about all of these later.
Thank you, Amy. I love the idea of the gift giving guide that's sustainable, because that's always what I'm thinking about when Christmas rolls around. Like, I don't just want to fill everyone's house full of stuff. Awesome. Susan, could you tell us a little bit about what's happening in your organization?
I have to say, before I start, I'm jazzed just listening to what everybody else is doing. I love that rehome idea. That's great. And it also makes me think to share with you in a different way that I had intended what happens as a result of this work. Sustainable Libraries Initiative, as Sarah has said, is a lot of work. There's like 13 areas and 280 tasks, and it's a 2-year proposition to get the work done. But it starts in a wonderful way with a survey of staff. And I have found that that's one of the most important pieces of work, because it generates enthusiasm. It starts people thinking, well, what is sustainability? And if you have a conversation about sustainability, it's a million different things to everybody. So how to get started, and what are the people you know and are interacting with every day really interested in, and what are they thinking about? One of the things that we learned as a result of that is that our recycling was getting thrown out with the trash. Now, I thought it was just our library, but it was a countywide problem. So, because that's a contract, right? So, a big part of this goes to purchasing. One of the things that I learned early on was purchasing is way behind us in sustainability in many ways, that we, because of Sustainable Libraries Initiative, started attacking things like single-use plastic, which we no longer buy, and water filling stations, which we had started to install, but now it's a plan for us to get them in many more places. And what are the other things we can do? So now we also realize that we are heavily invested in resilience, and we offer our spaces because our libraries throughout the county are spaces that are available in times of need. So now we have generators at a number of places for when there are power outages that are planned. People have a place to go and charge up. That's a part of what we want people to know that we do. We also offer our spaces as local assistance centers after emergencies like the flooding that occurred recently, as staging centers because we have technology, we have physical space. We can bring in a lot of entities and make it accessible for people to start recovering from whatever horrible thing has happened. That's a really important part of work in libraries, and now we're paying more attention to that. And as a result of this work, we have stronger relationships with our Office of Emergency Services. The library is seen as a player in emergency situations, which is very different than it was a couple of years ago when we started this. That's important, and it's different in how we approach the work now. One other thing I want to mention, which is not a thing I would think I would talk about today, is policies. As we worked on this, I don't know about you all, but we had policies that were in our minds that we thought we were written down for sustainability. And now we've really looked at what are the policies in the county, what is the need. Like, I think there's a need to aggregate sustainability policies so people have examples to look at. And there's a need for training. We started having regular speakers on sustainability, which that's something we can all do, and not do it all ourselves, and bring in experts and help people to see all the resources that are out there that are there for them. It's pretty amazing. We have a public works department that does fix-it clinics for people. Not only is there composting, but there's just a bevy of resources out there of things we don't have to do that, but we can guest host. Another thing that we discovered in this process is the Green Business Council in San Diego. And we went about the business of trying to get some of our buildings certified, and they're a great resource, and they work with everybody. And matter of fact, they were the ones that helped us get into a better process of using recycled paper, because our business department didn't think that was something we could really put through our copiers. And so sustainability becomes a lot of little conversations to get to a bigger result. Now we have recycled paper in all of our copiers because Green Business Council helped us explain what we needed to be doing. And now we no longer buy single-use plastic, which I had no idea would be such a big accomplishment for us. So that's just a few ideas of things we've done. And like everybody else, we're converting our vehicles to an EV fleet. We plan to have that completed by 2028. Our buildings now, we hope they will be net zero, and we try to plan for that. But it's all a work in progress.
Thank you so much, Susan. That all sounds really amazing. This brings us to our last question. It's going to be on the shorter side, and then we'll have time for some Q&A. My final question for panelists is, I guess it's not a question. Could you provide us with some practical takeaways that could be implemented or inspire our employees to take this kind of work on? So Lali, do you want to start us out?
In thinking about practical takeaways, I guess I kind of want to share like that I'm an instructional librarian. That's that's primarily the context in which I think about sustainability in many ways. And something practical that I can share with folks, especially those of you who work in public facing roles, is thinking about how you discuss sustainability in a research and instructional context. So with my students, something I talk about a lot is considering other epistemologies besides the ones that we have been constantly and consistently embedded in. So thinking about indigenous epistemologies when it comes to environmental or ecological research, and thinking about ways that can be integrated into your instruction curriculum. So oftentimes when I'm working with students or in classes, I ask them to consider alternate contexts, looking also at, for example, like tribal knowledge, looking for that information in literature. It can be really tough for students to kind of wrap their minds around that. But that is something that I try to be very intentional about. And I don't think that it only extends just to, being like an environmental studies librarian. I think that this is a conversation you can have more broadly and in other areas too, in other subject areas. But yeah, that's probably like one practical takeaway I think I would offer here.
Thanks, Lolly. Sarah.
So mine is pretty quick. Really, from what I've found is to start small and celebrate each tiny step. So one of the recycling things that we did was to recycle the tiny little bread tags, and they have become really significant because people are thinking much bigger just because of that one little tiny act. And the other takeaway that I have is that it's okay to be imperfectly sustainable. So a lot of the times we don't want to take on these tasks because they just seem overwhelming when you've got to think of all of the aspects of it. And it's okay not to be perfect, but at least we're making an attempt. So that's kind of my philosophy on it.
Thanks, Sarah. Baby steps, right? Amy.
And I think, right, to expand on what Sarah said, because I was going to say the same thing, start small, right? And I'll say ask questions, right? So if you're wondering about something, ask a question, because there's others who are going to have the same or similar interests, and so you can start small, work together. The other thing, and I will say, and I do this a lot based on my current job of a GIS librarian. What does that mean in terms of sort of research and support and all of those? But it's reframing controversial topics. And so if and Sarah, I'm thinking about the colleague you mentioned in Florida, right? If you can't talk about sustainability or climate change, do you frame it through a lens of disaster management planning, right? That's something that everyone sees, whether it's environmentally or other. It's disaster management planning. And so it's reframing things to be able to get those same concepts and ideas across, but just rotate the lens a little. So I think I'll leave it at those two.
And Susan.
I agree with everybody else. I would say be curious, start where you are, because I certainly was not a sustainability expert when I started this, and share. I think the other thing that I would share on this is simple things like Earth Day. I have to say the county did an Earth Day, and I went to it, and I am so surprised continuously at what our staff come up with since we've started this that I had no idea about. I go to Earth Day and staff have a series of sustainability quizzes that were fabulous and fascinating and engaging for everybody. And that's what we do in libraries. Like, I'm constantly impressed with what bubbles up every day from our staff that makes us better sustainably.
Well, thank you all so much for all of these wonderful things that you're doing in these different libraries. just listening to you all, I was thinking like, oh, I wonder if we can have a fix it session in our new makery. Like there's just so much crossover that can happen when we share these kinds of ideas and we share the initiatives happening in our different libraries. It can be really, really wonderful, and it's important to have these types of gatherings where we can talk about the work that we're doing. That ends our kind of formal questions for the panelists. So if any folks have follow-up questions, we are now in our Q&A, and I will pause myself and look and see if there's anything in the chat. But if you have a question and you're in the room, please raise your hand. Jen Fabi from CSUSM, go ahead.
Hi, I really appreciate all of this. So I have a question about sustainable workload. So when we were working on our strategic plan last year, we kind of went back and forth about what is our definition of sustainability? Are we talking specifically about environmental sustainability, or is it a broader concept? And so I'm wondering if in any of your conversations and committees at your institutions, if you've brought in your, and I think you've all been talking about a broad definition, but if you have broadened your definition of sustainability to include sustainable workload for staff and faculty.
I can answer to some of what this is that we are doing. We haven't got to actually including the sustainable workload, but it is part of what we're doing in terms of our policy. As part of the Sustainable Libraries Initiative, there's a whole section on wellness, and it is wellness within the library. So it's really analyzing those policies, analyzing your definition of sustainability, but it really falls within social equity and employer wellness. So it is something that we are definitely considering. We haven't formalized anything yet, but we are definitely taking that into consideration. And then we would make recommendations out of that. I know a lot of our librarians have that we respect people's hours. If you work late and you send an email, we expect you not to respond. So we've got a lot of informal stuff like that. But we haven't formalized that.
Do any other panelists want to answer before we move on to the next question?
I mean, I'll say I think I would have to defer to others in my library, specifically on that question. However, I know that the Library Sustainability Committee works with other committees. And so we have an EDI working group where we are looking at, right, about like retention and other policies that do affect the daily load of library staff. And so I think it's in there, but it's sort of right. It's this collaboration of how do we define sustainability, and it is of every aspect of life. And so from the individual workload down to building materials and resources, I think they should all be taken into that same consideration.
Thank you. Let's move on to the next question. Eric from UCSC, I see your hand up.
Hey, Tricia, thanks. And thanks, everybody. I'll just plus one what Jen said. It's really fascinating to hear everything. Susan, you mentioned going net zero with your libraries. I'd love to just hear more about like what that looks like.
Well, and it's like all these things, there's success and failure, right? So you can go to our website, which I posted earlier, and look at our net zero. Our first net zero building was Alpine Library. You can also go, just for your curiosity, to the county's general services page and see, if you noodle around in their new dashboard, you can see the report for how we're doing. So I will tell you that I was in on the building of Alpine Library, for instance, and there was a robust conversation with engineers and builders and consultants about how the library would close and be available during certain hours. And public libraries, we want to be there for everybody. So a lot of times we're open after hours, and the doors, we see over 500,000 people a year. So the consultants thought they were going to control how traffic was happening in the library, which you can't really control it. You can't stop the door from opening all day long. And so, depending on, if you look at that, you'll see sometimes we're doing better than others and getting to net zero, but we are heading in that direction. And it is definitely a commitment and thought for how we get there. So now our systems, things that I never used to think about, we have our newer buildings are on a BAS system that regulates everything. We talk about the temperature standards for the buildings and in our new buildings and try to keep them under control. And we talk a lot about fresh air, helping us moderate the use of our space. And now we are going back to our other buildings to reduce energy use based on what we've been learning. And while we won't get to net zero probably in those buildings anytime soon, we are boosting solar panels, probably like a lot of you all. We're trying to look at innovative ways to lower energy use. And so it is beginning to affect our overall operating model. It's a really interesting, complicated topic.
That's fascinating. Thank you. And yeah, it didn't occur to me that just even building use would be a confounding factor in a
Oh,
net
yeah.
zero model.
Yeah, we like to open the building to people after hours, and so that completely throws the model off course.
Susan, and I have a follow-up question on that. I think you were the one that mentioned the San Diego Green Building Council. Did they
They're
help
like
you along?
amazing. They're
Okay.
amazing.
Okay.
I I have to say, the politics of work. One of the things in this last year is now we have 5 buildings that have been certified by the Building Council. And with the county, they're like, how did you do this? It was one of the easier things we did, which we fell into because of the Sustainable Libraries Initiative. They're a great organization. They have lots of resources. And they came out and we just started with one building to see what it would take. But somebody mentioned LEED earlier, which LEED is a process where you sit down as the building is built and there's a checklist of things that you do, and it costs you money as you're building the building. The Green Business Council will come in and see what are you already doing that helps you get there, and what small changes could you make, like using paper that's got recyclable content in it that helps you get to their certification level. And we've been really successful, and I think they're just a great resource. So I encourage you to check them out.
Great. Does anyone have any final questions for our panelists? So I don't see anything in our chat, but Margaret, I believe, or maybe Sarah posted a document, and I will repost it in our chat. That has the email and contact information of all of our panelists today. So if you want to follow up with anyone, you can use that for contacts. It also has some links for each university. And if someone could just repost that, Sarah, could you repost it? Because for some reason it's not working for me. At the very end of that document, there is a survey link, and we encourage you to please fill out that brief survey so we can get feedback on this webinar and improve it or change it or do it again better next time, right? So we very much appreciate you coming today. Thank you so much to the panelists for sharing all of the insights and all the great work that you're doing in sustainability in all your different libraries. So thank you all. And if there's no last comments or questions, I hope you all have a good lunch.